The night he decided to invite his ex was not about love. It was about proof. Proof to himself, to his friends, and to the world that he was no longer broken by the past. For months, people had whispered that he still missed her, that everything he did was just a way to hide the hurt. He was tired of those looks, tired of being treated like a man stuck in yesterday. He had built his life with discipline. Long hours at work, careful choices, and a strong sense of control over his emotions. When the relationship ended, it was not loud or dramatic. It ended quietly, with cold words and pride on both sides. She walked away believing she would always be unforgettable. He stayed behind, pretending he was fine, but he was not fine. At least not at first. The invitation he sent was polite, almost formal. No emotion, no hidden message. Just a simple note about a small gathering at his place. A celebration, nothing more. When she replied that she would come, his heart beat faster for a moment, then slowed. This time, he promised himself he would not fall apart. On the day of the gathering, his house was busy. Friends moved around. Laughter filled the rooms. Soft music played in the background. Everything looked perfect on the surface. The lights were warm, the food carefully arranged, and the place felt alive again. Among all the noise, there was a quiet figure moving from corner to corner. A young maid hired through an agency to help for the evening. She wore simple clothes, her hair neatly tied back. She spoke softly, almost disappearing into the background as she worked. To most people, she was invisible, but he noticed her. Not at first in any deep way. Just small things. The way she apologized when someone passed by, even when it was not her fault. The way she smiled to herself while arranging plates. The calm on her face, as if noise and chaos could not disturb her peace. When his ex finally arrived, the room shifted. Heads turned. She walked in with confidence, dressed in expensive clothes, her posture proud. She expected eyes to follow her, and they did. She glanced at him. Waiting for some sign of weakness, he greeted her with a calm smile. That alone surprised her. They exchanged polite words. Nothing warm, nothing cold. Just to people who once shared a life now pretending they were strangers who knew each other well. His friends watched closely, expecting tension, drama, or regret. But none came. As the night went on, he realized something strange. He was not focused on his ex at all. His attention kept drifting to the quiet maid. She moved carefully, always aware of others, never drawing attention to herself. At one point, she helped an elderly guest find a seat, speaking gently, listening with patience. Something about that moment stayed with him. Later, he accidentally bumped into her near the kitchen. She quickly apologized, even though he was the one who had stepped into her path. He told her it was fine, and for a second their eyes met. Her eyes were honest, without fear or expectation. She smiled politely and walked away. That simple exchange felt more real than all the conversations he had that evening. His ex noticed where his attention went. She followed his gaze, then frowned. She could not understand what he saw. To her, the maid was just staff, someone who existed only to serve. She brushed the thought away, confident that she still held power over him. But power had quietly slipped from her hands as the night continued. He felt lighter. Not because of attention, praise, or success, but because for the first time in a long while, he felt present, not trapped in memories, not proving anything. Just existing in the moment, he overheard the maid speaking softly on the phone during a short break. She stood near the back door, away from everyone. Her voice carried worry and care. She spoke about sending money home, about her mother's medicine, about how she would manage next month. There was no self-pity in her tone, just responsibility. He did not mean to listen, but the words stayed with him. When the party ended, guests slowly left. His ex lingered longer than necessary. She tried to reopen old conversations, to remind him of shared memories, inside jokes, moments only they once understood. He listened politely, but felt no pull. Before leaving, she asked him directly if he was seeing someone. He paused. He thought of the quiet smile, the gentle voice, the steady strength. He answered honestly. "Not yet," she smiled, relieved, believing she still had a chance. After everyone left, the house grew silent. The maid stayed behind to help clean. He offered her water and thanked her for her work. She seemed surprised by the gesture. People rarely thanked her. She said she was just doing her job, but he knew it was more than that as she prepared to leave. He asked her name, then stopped himself, remembering how names often carried weight and expectations. Instead, he simply said he hoped to see her again if she worked there next time. She nodded politely, unsure what to say, then left quietly, just as she had arrived. That night, as he sat alone, he realized something important. Inviting his ex had shown him the truth. He had moved on, not into loneliness, not into pride, but toward something unexpected. He did not know her story fully yet. He did not know where this path would lead. But for the first time since the breakup, his heart felt calm. And somewhere in the city, the quiet maid walked home, unaware that her life had just crossed paths with someone whose future was about to change just as hers would, in ways neither of them could imagine. The story had begun, not with drama or revenge, but with a simple look, a gentle smile, and a truth finally accepted. The days after the gathering passed quietly, but his thoughts were louder than ever. He returned to his routine, waking early, working long hours, keeping his life organized. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside something felt different. His mind kept returning to small moments from that night. Not his ex's confident walk or her familiar voice, but the soft presence of the maid who had moved through the house like she belonged to a world far simpler than his own. He tried to ignore it at first. He told himself it was nothing, just curiosity, just respect for someone who worked hard. But curiosity did not fade. It grew. A week later, he hosted a small dinner for a business partner. When arranging help, he asked the agency to send the same maid if she was available. He did not explain why. When she arrived, she looked surprised to see him again. She greeted him politely, her tone careful, as if unsure whether she was welcome or just another worker filling a role. He made an effort not to watch her too closely, but it was difficult. She worked with quiet focus, never wasting movement, never complaining. When something went wrong, like a dish breaking or a guest asking too much, she handled it calmly. There was strength in that calm. During a short break, she stood by the window, looking outside. He asked if everything was okay. She nodded, then hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak honestly. Finally, she said she was fine, just tired. Her day had started before sunrise. She had taken 2 buses to reach the house. He felt something tighten in his chest. That night, after the guests left, he asked her to sit for a moment. He kept his voice respectful, careful not to cross a line. He offered her food before she left. She hesitated, then accepted. No one had offered her that before. They talked. Not about big dreams or dramatic stories. Just simple things. Where she grew up, how she came to the city, why she worked so hard. She spoke about responsibility, about taking care of family, about promises made long ago. There was no bitterness in her words, only honesty. He shared less, only small pieces of his life, enough to show he was human, not distant or untouchable. As she left, he realized something that unsettled him. He looked forward to seeing her again. Meanwhile, his ex had not disappeared. She noticed his distance and mistook it for pride. She reached out, sending messages filled with memories and soft regret. She suggested meeting for coffee, reminding him of how well they once understood each other. He replied politely, but slowly, without urgency. When they finally met, it felt strange. Sitting across from her, he saw her clearly for the first time. The ambition, the need to be admired, the way every conversation turned back to her. Once, this had excited him. Now it felt heavy. She spoke about the future she imagined for herself, assuming he would fit into it as before. She laughed when she mentioned the maid from the party. Calling her invisible and unimportant, he did not laugh. That moment created a quiet distance between them in the following weeks. He found more reasons to be at home when the maid worked. He noticed details others ignored. How she always cleaned the same spot twice. How she listened more than she spoke. How she avoided eye contact when people raised their voices, even jokingly. One evening, he overheard her crying softly in the kitchen. She quickly wiped her face when she noticed him. She apologized, embarrassed. He told her she did not have to explain, but she did anyway. A family issue. Money short. Fear of losing work. He did not offer solutions. He simply listened. That mattered more than she realized. Trust began to grow slowly and carefully. She started speaking more freely, smiling without restraint. She teased him gently when he forgot where he put things. He laughed, surprised by how easy it felt. Yet doubt lived in her heart. She knew the gap between their lives was wide. She reminded herself daily that kindness did not mean intention. She had learned that lesson before. Others noticed too. Friends questioned his interest. They warned him about confusion, about mixing worlds. He listened but did not argue. He was tired of choosing love based on comfort and approval. One afternoon, his ex showed up unannounced. She wanted answers. She demanded honesty. She accused him of acting distant, of hiding something. Her voice carried entitlement, not concern. He remained calm. He told her the truth. He had moved on, not in anger, not in revenge, but in growth. She followed his gaze across the room and saw the maid quietly arranging flowers. Her expression changed from confusion to disbelief. She laughed sharply, calling it impossible. He did not respond. Later that evening, the maid asked if she had done something wrong. She had felt tension, but did not understand it. He assured her she had done nothing wrong. His voice was gentle, steady. As she prepared to leave, he thanked her again. This time, the words carried more weight. That night, alone again, he faced the truth he could no longer avoid. What he felt was not curiosity. It was not kindness. It was the beginning of something real, and across the city. The maid sat in a small room, counting money carefully. Unaware that her quiet strength had begun to change the direction of a life far different from her own. Neither of them knew how difficult the path ahead would be. How many doubts, judgments, and tests awaited them. But something had already taken root, and once it did, it refused to be ignored. The following weeks were quiet on the surface. But beneath that calm, tension was growing. The maid continued her work with the same quiet dedication, moving through the house like a shadow that kept everything in order. To him, she was no longer just someone doing her job. She had become the center of his thoughts in ways he could not ignore. The small gestures, her careful attention, the way she never asked for recognition, it all added up into something deeper than admiration. He started noticing her in unexpected moments. How she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, how she adjusted a vase just so, how she smiled at a child without being asked. These small details filled his mind long after she had left for the day. It was not infatuation, he realized slowly. It was respect, and it was growing into something more. Meanwhile, his ex became increasingly bold. She called and texted, trying to reinsert herself into his life. She reminded him of their shared past, of promises once made, of memories she assumed would still bind him. Each message carried a hint of expectation, a subtle demand that he acknowledge her continued place in his world. But he did not respond the way she wanted. He responded politely, but his answers were measured, careful not to give her any false hope. One afternoon, she arrived unexpectedly at his office. She was confident, as always, her presence commanding attention. She spoke quickly, trying to remind him of all they had shared. Her words carried nostalgia, and she tried to make him feel guilt for moving on. He listened without interrupting, but he did not falter. He could feel the pull of the past, but he had learned to stay steady. Across the room, the maid arrived to deliver refreshments. She carried herself quietly, unaware of the tension in the air. She moved without drawing attention, placing the tray down gently and offering a polite smile. The ex noticed her and smirked, assuming that she was insignificant. A simple worker with no place in the story, he did not speak of the maid. He did not need to. His ex could see, if she wanted to, that his attention kept drifting. She frowned, confused, frustrated. She could not understand how someone she had thought would always be under her influence could look past her so easily. After the ex left, he found a moment alone with the maid. They spoke casually, lightly, about nothing in particular. Yet every word felt significant. He asked about her family, about her day, about the small details she often shared quietly. She responded honestly, hesitating only for a moment before trusting him with her words. He listened, genuinely interested. Letting her know that her life mattered, days turned into weeks, and the connection grew stronger. He realized that what he felt was not fleeting. He looked forward to her presence, to the way she moved through the house, to the sound of her voice speaking softly. He wanted to know more about her world, her struggles, her hopes, her fears. Each detail she shared added depth to the bond forming between them. At the same time, the ex refused to disappear. She tried different ways to regain influence, sending messages that hinted at jealousy, subtly mentioning her accomplishments, her experiences, and the life she assumed he would still care about. She even came to events he hosted, always watching, always expecting him to falter. He remained calm, composed, unaffected by her attempts. His thoughts always returned to the maid, to her laughter, to her quiet determination. The contrast between her and the ex became impossible to ignore. The ex sought control, recognition, status. The maid offered honesty, kindness, resilience. She had no agenda, no need for attention. And that difference was what drew him in. One evening, after a long day, he found himself walking with the maid through the empty streets. They spoke quietly, sharing stories about their lives, their pasts, their small victories. She laughed at his mistakes, and he listened intently to her experiences. There was no judgment, no pretense, only mutual understanding. He realized he had never felt this way before. Not about anyone. The ex tried one final attempt. She showed up at another gathering, confident and poised. She approached him, expecting to see hesitation, a flicker of past attachment. Instead, he greeted her politely and introduced her briefly, then turned away. His focus returned to the maid, who had been quietly assisting with the guests. The ex's expression changed from confidence to shock. She realized finally that her influence was gone. She had underestimated the simplicity and strength of someone who had nothing but honesty to offer. That night, alone, he reflected on the growing bond between him and the maid. He knew that there would be challenges ahead. Their worlds were different, their experiences unlike each other. But the connection they shared felt genuine, untainted by pride, ambition, or past pain. It was real. And somewhere in the city, the maid went about her life, unaware of the full extent of the change she had brought to someone's heart. She had no illusions, no expectations. She simply moved through her days with dignity and care. Yet her quiet presence had begun to shift the course of a life that had once been focused on proving things to others. It was now focused on something far more profound, something neither of them could have predicted. Weeks passed, and the bond between him and the maid grew stronger, though both approached it carefully. Neither spoke openly about feelings yet. Words carried weight, and they knew a single misstep could change everything. Yet in quiet moments, their connection deepened. Revealing emotions neither had expected, he started noticing the smallest details about her. How she paused to listen when someone spoke, even if it wasn't important. How she remembered the little things he mentioned in passing. How she managed a balance between work and caring for her family that left her tired yet always patient. Each observation made him realize he had never met anyone like her. She, in turn, began noticing him beyond his polished exterior. She saw the quiet struggle beneath his confidence, the moments when he was genuinely concerned about people and not just maintaining appearances. She appreciated that he listened to her, really listened without judgment. In her world, that was rare. One evening, he invited her to help with preparations for a small event at his house. He explained it casually, as though it were routine, but inside he hoped she would come. She agreed, and as they worked together, they laughed over small mistakes, shared stories about their lives, and moved through tasks in sync. The ease between them surprised both of them. There was no tension, no pretense, only honesty and companionship. Meanwhile, his ex sensed that she was losing influence entirely. She reached out again, this time more insistent. She sent messages and calls that suggested she knew he cared about someone else, though she didn't yet know who. Her tone was a mixture of warning, guilt, and subtle threats, hoping to pull him back under her control. He responded with politeness, but firm boundaries. Each refusal frustrated her more. The maid was unaware of much of this. She lived simply, focusing on her responsibilities and her family. She did notice him checking his phone, seeing messages from someone she could guess was important. She did not pry. She had learned that people often had complicated lives, and sometimes the best support was silent. During one quiet evening after the event, they sat on the balcony, sharing a cup of tea. He spoke about small things, memories from his childhood, moments of joy he rarely admitted. She listened, offering gentle questions and smiles. In that space, something unspoken passed between them. It was comfort, safety, and the first spark of trust that went beyond words. A few days later, the ex arrived unannounced at his house. She wanted answers, explanations, and proof that she still mattered. He invited her in, but only briefly, explaining he was busy. She tried to gauge his attention, but he remained calm. He introduced her politely to the maid, who was assisting with chores, and then focused on work again. The ex noticed the natural ease between them and began to realize that she had lost her place. Anger and disbelief flickered across her face, but he did not engage. He had learned the futility of trying to justify his choices to someone who did not see him clearly. That evening, after the ex left, he found a quiet moment with the maid. He complimented her on her work, her patience, and her integrity. She looked surprised, not used to such acknowledgement, especially from someone with his stature. He smiled gently, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. It was simple, yet meaningful. As days turned into weeks, he realized he wanted to spend more time with her, to know her world more fully. He invited her to accompany him on small errands, to share meals when possible, and gradually she began to accept. Each moment together built familiarity and trust. She felt safe around him, and he felt understood in ways he never had before, yet doubts lingered in both their minds. Their lives were different. He had wealth, influence, and a life structured by choice. She had responsibility, modest means, and a world shaped by necessity. Could a relationship between them truly exist? Could feelings survive the gaps in their experiences? Then came a day when she faced a personal challenge. A sudden family emergency required her attention, and she was anxious about fulfilling her duties at work. He noticed her distress immediately. Without hesitation, he offered help coordinating solutions quietly, ensuring she could manage both her responsibilities and the emergency. She was overwhelmed by his care, not just for the situation, for her as a person. That evening, she confided in him, sharing her worries and fears. He listened patiently, offering support without judgment, without assuming he could fix everything. For the first time, she felt truly seen. Not as a maid, not as someone beneath him, but as a person with depth, courage, and feelings that mattered. Their bond shifted after that night. The comfort between them became something more. He found himself thinking of her constantly, wondering about her day, hoping she was safe. She began to anticipate his gestures, subtle attention, and quiet support. Feeling an unexpected warmth she had not allowed herself to feel before. Meanwhile, the ex continued her attempts from afar. She sent indirect messages, flaunting her lifestyle, hinting at success, hoping to lure him back. But each time, he remained calm. His thoughts were elsewhere, on someone whose presence brought him peace and understanding. The ex's attempts now seemed futile, almost absurd. One evening, he asked her to join him for a quiet walk. They strolled through empty streets, talking about small things, sharing laughs, and experiencing a rare calm together. The world seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in a space that felt safe and real. Words of affection were still unspoken, yet the feelings were clear in every glance, every shared smile, every gentle gesture by the end of the night. He realized that what he felt had moved beyond admiration or friendship. He cared for her deeply. And for the first time, he understood that love could arise from honesty, trust, and shared quiet moments, not from grand gestures or past connections. The maid, in turn, began to sense that their bond was changing. She noticed his concern for her, the way he remembered details she had shared, the respect in his every action. She had never experienced attention like this before. She felt warmth and safety, yet she also worried about the differences between them. Could someone from his world truly value someone like her without judgment? The challenge of their growing connection was clear. It was real, but fragile. The world around them, their differences, and the shadow of the past all threatened to interfere. Yet in that quiet space, they found a spark that neither could ignore, a bond that demanded attention and respect. And so their story moved forward, delicate yet strong, quiet yet undeniable, setting the stage for a decision that would change both their lives forever. The days leading up to the final gathering were filled with quiet anticipation. He had spent weeks reflecting on everything that had happened since the night of the first party, since the moments he had first truly noticed her. He understood now that his feelings were not temporary curiosity or a fleeting connection. They were deep, rooted in trust, respect, and admiration for someone who had shown strength, patience, and kindness in every small action. He carefully planned a small gathering, not extravagant, but meaningful. Friends would be there, but the focus was different. This time, it was not about proving he had moved on, nor was it about status or appearances. It was about sharing something genuine, about honesty, and about revealing feelings that had grown quietly over months. The maid arrived to help with preparations. Unaware that the night would mark a turning point in both their lives, she moved quietly, arranging tables, adjusting chairs, making sure everything was ready. She noticed that he seemed calmer, more at peace, though he moved with his usual care and focus. He occasionally glanced at her, watching the small ways she adjusted to challenges, and felt warmth spread through him. It was not just admiration now. It was love quietly emerging, undeniable and certain as guests arrived. He greeted them warmly, but his mind returned often to her. He observed her subtle movements, the way she interacted politely with everyone, always attentive, never seeking recognition. He realized that it was her authenticity, her natural grace, that had drawn him from the first moment and that kept him captivated. The ex had heard about the gathering, and though she had no official invitation, she showed up. She carried herself with the same confidence, expecting perhaps to interrupt, to test his feelings. When she arrived, he greeted her politely, maintaining composure. He introduced her briefly to other guests, but his attention immediately returned to the maid. She was arranging glasses, helping a guest who had dropped a napkin, and moving with quiet care. He could see the contrast clearly now, the ex with her need for control, her desire to dominate attention, and the maid with her calm, effortless presence throughout the evening. He stayed close to the maid, engaging in small conversations, sharing laughter and offering help. She felt a growing ease around him, noticing that his attention was sincere, consistent, and not fleeting. Her feelings, too, began to deepen. She sensed that this bond had grown beyond work or politeness. It was genuine, warm, and steady. At one point, the ex tried to engage him in conversation, bringing up memories, teasing lightly, hoping to provoke a reaction. He responded politely, but kept his focus elsewhere. She noticed the way his eyes kept returning to the maid, how his smiles were reserved for her, how his gestures, small and subtle, were directed at her. Disbelief flickered across the ex's face. She realized that her attempts no longer held any power over him. His heart had chosen. As the night progressed, he found a quiet moment to speak with the maid privately. He led her to the balcony, away from the noise, where they could speak freely. The cool air and the soft glow of city lights provided a calm backdrop. He spoke gently, reflecting on the past months, the shared moments, and the trust that had grown between them. She listened, her heart beating faster, feeling a mix of surprise, warmth, and cautious hope. He admitted that his feelings had grown stronger than he had expected, that her kindness, patience, and authenticity had drawn him closer, that her courage in the face of challenges had inspired him, and finally, that he wanted her in his life, not as a fleeting presence, not as someone to fill a role, but as the person he wanted to share his future with. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Her life had taught her to expect caution, to doubt sudden changes. She hesitated, processing the sincerity in his eyes, the calm certainty in his voice, the warmth that radiated from his gestures. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple but meaningful token. It was not an extravagant piece of jewelry, not a symbol of wealth, but a ring with a quiet elegance, symbolizing commitment, respect, and genuine love. He knelt, not as a performance, but as an honest expression of what he felt. Her eyes widened, tears forming, but a smile slowly spread across her face. She realized that what she had sensed was true. His love was not about appearances, status, or power. It was about her and about the bond that had quietly grown between them over weeks of shared moments, trust and understanding. With a steady voice, he asked her to marry him, to share a life built on honesty, care, and mutual respect. The world seemed to pause. The noise of the party faded, leaving only the two of them in that moment of clarity, truth, and emotion. She said yes. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of months of growing feelings, trust, and understanding. In that instant, all doubts, fears, and differences seemed to fade. They had found each other, not through grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but through quiet, consistent care and respect. Guests, observing from a distance, felt the sincerity of the moment. The ex watched, silent and speechless, realizing that her expectations and attempts had failed. He had moved on indeed, but not in the way she had imagined. His heart had chosen authenticity, care, and love that was grounded in reality and shared understanding. That night, as they stood together, holding hands and looking at each other, the city lights reflecting softly around them, they understood the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, questions, and moments of doubt. But they also knew that the foundation of their bond, trust, respect, and genuine care was strong enough to weather any storm. In the days that followed, their lives began to intertwine more deeply. They shared meals, conversations, small errands, and quiet moments. He introduced her gently to aspects of his world, and she shared the simplicity and honesty of hers. Each day strengthened their connection, making it clear that love could bridge worlds, overcome differences, and create something lasting and true. And so, the story concluded not with drama or spectacle, but with the quiet triumph of genuine human connection, a bond built on trust, patience, and authenticity, leading to a love that neither wealth, status, nor past experiences could shake. It was a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories are those that grow quietly, steadily, and honestly, until they become undeniable. Life after their engagement brought a new rhythm to their days. The quiet maid, now more than just a worker in his house, began to experience a world she had only glimpsed from a distance. She moved carefully, still mindful of her responsibilities and humble nature. Yet she allowed herself small joys and experiences she had once thought were unreachable. The way he treated her, always respectful, never patronizing, made it possible for her to imagine a life that was safe, kind, and full of warmth. He noticed every change in her, every subtle shift, how she carried herself when she felt more confident, how her laughter became freer, lighter, less cautious, how her eyes sparkled with curiosity and wonder at the small adventures they shared together. He realized that love was not just a feeling but a living, growing thing that thrived on trust, respect, and understanding. Their days were filled with small moments that mattered more than grand gestures. Breakfasts shared before the start of a busy day, quiet walks in the park, evenings spent talking about dreams and fears, or simply sitting together in silence while the city moved around them. Each moment deepened their bond, weaving their lives into a shared story that neither could have predicted. The ex, watching from afar, realized that her attempts to reclaim influence were no longer effective. She tried occasionally to reach out, sometimes indirectly through mutual acquaintances, sometimes by subtle messages. Each attempt reminded him of the life he had chosen to leave behind, but it no longer carried any weight. His heart was firmly, completely with the maid, and he no longer questioned the depth of his feelings. Meanwhile, she faced new challenges of her own. Adjusting to his world while still honoring her own roots and responsibilities required care and patience. She was careful not to let pride or fear interfere with the bond they were building. When she struggled, he was there not to control, not to solve, but to support. His support was quiet, steady, and unwavering. It was in the small gestures, a hand on her back when she felt uncertain, a kind word when she doubted herself, a silent understanding when words were unnecessary. One afternoon she received unexpected news from home. A family matter needed urgent attention, something that required both her presence and careful management. She felt anxiety rise, worried about disappointing him, worried about balancing her responsibilities with the new life she was slowly embracing. She spoke to him, her voice trembling slightly. He listened carefully, asking questions only to understand, never to judge. Then, without hesitation, he offered practical help, coordinating solutions quietly and effectively. She was stunned by the depth of his care. It was not performative. It was sincere, thoughtful, and loving. That night, they sat together in the quiet of the living room. She spoke more freely than she ever had, sharing fears, doubts, and hopes. He listened without interruption, absorbing each word, each nuance, each emotion. She realized that he valued not just her presence, but her thoughts, her feelings, and her humanity. In that moment, the walls she had built over years of hardship began to soften. Trust was no longer tentative. It was growing strong. Their love began to influence others around them. Friends and family noticed the change in both of them. He seemed more at peace, more grounded. She seemed more confident, radiant even, carrying herself with a quiet strength. Those who knew their story understood that what they had was rare, a connection that had survived differences, hardships, and past shadows to become something extraordinary. In the weeks that followed, they faced challenges that tested their bond. Outside opinions, societal expectations, and the occasional reminder of past lives created friction. Yet each challenge was met with communication, understanding, and patience. They learned to navigate difficulties not by ignoring them, but by facing them together. Building resilience in the process one day, while walking through a quiet neighborhood park, they encountered a situation that could have caused tension. A misunderstanding with a passerby escalated, but they handled it calmly, supporting each other with subtle gestures and gentle words. After the incident, they laughed quietly, recognizing that challenges were easier when faced as a team. It became a lesson in partnership, a demonstration of how their bond was growing stronger in the face of adversity. Even small celebrations became meaningful. Birthdays, simple victories, moments of personal growth, they shared them with intention. Each celebration was not about extravagance, but about acknowledgement of life, love, and shared experience. They created memories that were personal, authentic, and full of meaning. As months turned into a year, their engagement became a story known to friends, family, and close acquaintances. People admired the quiet strength of their connection, the way love had blossomed from respect, patience, and shared understanding rather than superficial attraction or circumstance. The maid, once shy and cautious, now moved with confidence and pride. Knowing that she was valued, loved, and seen, he continued to learn from her as well. Her perspective, grounded in resilience and practicality, reminded him to slow down, to appreciate the small things, to value honesty above all else. She challenged him gently, encouraged him quietly, and inspired him more than he had anticipated. Their partnership was evolving, each day shaping their shared life into something stronger, deeper, and more meaningful. Even the ex, watching from a distance, could not deny the transformation. Attempts to interfere became futile. She understood finally that influence could not be forced, and that love built on authenticity and respect was unshakable. In quiet moments, they reflected on their journey. From the night of the first gathering, from the casual glances and small conversations, to shared challenges and growing affection, the path had been unexpected, yet undeniable. They realized that the strongest love was often the one that grew quietly, patiently and sincerely, allowing each person to feel seen, valued and understood, and so their lives continued. Intertwined in a story that was not about wealth, past relationships, or appearances. It was about honesty, kindness, shared struggle, and genuine care. The maid, once quiet and humble, had become the center of a life built on love that was real and enduring. He, once careful to prove he had moved on, had found a partner who made him feel whole in ways he had never known. Together, they looked ahead, aware that challenges would come, that life would continue to test them in new ways. Yet they knew that their foundation built on respect, trust, and unwavering care would carry them through. Their love was a quiet triumph, a story that reminded them both, and everyone who witnessed it, that true connection is not about circumstance or convenience. It is about seeing and valuing the person beside you through every moment, ordinary and extraordinary alike.